losing a loved one is always traumatic, but losing a loved one to suicide brings with it questions and issues that often stay with one forever. I mentioned this before. My brother Carter died by suicide 30 years ago this July. It's the 30-year anniversary, and there's not a day that goes by when I still don't wonder, what was he thinking? Why did this happen? It's hard sometimes to get past the way his life ended instead of remembering how he lived his life. Randy, it was 15 years ago you lost your dad. People on TV often use that word closure, which I hate that word. I just think there's no such thing, particularly in the wake of suicide. Do you still think about it every day? Do you still, what is it like to be a survivor?
It's very difficult. I mean, you certainly know that. I think, now more than 15 years later, I still have just as many questions as I did on that night at 11 o'clock. I was living in Minneapolis at the time, 11 p.m. I'd come home from anchoring the late news, got a call from my mother, hysterical, crying on the phone to tell me what had happened to my dad. And I immediately went into reporter mode. I thought somebody must have killed him. I never imagined that my father would do this, that he would leave us, that he would take his life. So he didn't leave a note. So, to this day, I still have so many questions. I called his doctors over the years. I was convinced he had a terminal illness. I called his friends to try and find out if they knew something that we didn't. So I still struggle with the why, as you talk about. I also have these very painful what-if moments. What if I had spoken to him that morning at 10:30 in the morning, I remember, and we had a very nice conversation. I was helping him program some things in his telephone. What if I just kept him on the phone a little bit longer? What if something might have come up? What if he would have shared something with me? Or what if I had called him that evening when he, was thinking about that moment when he was taking his life? He had to, he had a gun in one room and the bullets were 2 bedrooms away. What if I had called him in that moment while he was walking from one room to the next and just changed his mind, caught him in the act? Maybe that would have saved him. And I also struggle too with, being so angry at him. So many days still, all these years later, being so angry that he left us. And also feeling such pity and such sorrow for him that he missed out on so much of my life, so much joy. My sister was pregnant with a granddaughter who's here in the audience tonight, Talia, who he's never had the chance to meet. And that just breaks my heart. And I still live with all of that.
Welcome back to our town hall, Finding Hope, Battling America's Suicide Crisis. And a reminder, if you're struggling right now or you know someone who may need help, please reach out to any of the organizations that we're showing you on the bottom of the screen throughout this hour. You're not alone. Reach out. Family and friends often wonder about the warning signs of suicide. Sometimes there may be no indication, but many times there are things to look for if you know how to identify them. Joining me again is Dr. Moutier, and with me now also is Talinda Bennington, who lost her husband, Chester Bennington, the lead singer of Linkin Park, to suicide. Also with us is Kirsten Powers, who recently wrote about her own experience during a difficult time in her life when she was coping with thoughts of suicide. She's a USA Today columnist, a CNN political analyst, and co-host of the Faith Angle podcast. Talinda, first of all, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I appreciate you being here. I think when somebody well-known dies by suicide, there's such shock. So many people wonder how somebody at the pinnacle of their career, how this could happen to them. And obviously in a family, there's always shock. Were there warning signs that you saw at the time or that now in retrospect stand out to you? Absolutely.
Absolutely there were. I am now more educated about those signs, but they were definitely there. The hopelessness, the change of behavior, isolation, that was all part of our daily life. Sometimes some signs were there more than others. Some signs they weren't there at all, as the case right before he passed. He was at his best before he passed. We were on a family vacation. He just had to go back home to do a television commercial, and I was going to see him the next day. It was just the timing of it. He had been in states of depression before, and he had past attempts. This was not a time where any of our families suspected this to happen, which is terrifying, because it could happen at any moment with those thoughts.
Kirsten, you wrote just recently in just an incredibly powerful way, and that I think really impacted a lot of people, about a depression that you were going through and that impulses you started to feel toward suicide. Had you felt it before, and what
No, I had never felt it before. Now, I've struggled with anxiety my whole life, so I had sort of episodes of feeling very anxious. I'd never had any feeling of actually thinking through how I might kill myself. And this was after my father had died. I just left my job and I was freelancing and had a relationship breakup, and so I had a whole bunch of things kind
All
of
of those
piling.
are huge factors.
Right, piling on each other and a lot of changes, and I started to have these feelings and thoughts and really imagining, and even at one point like opened the oven and put my head in and kind of pulled back when I thought about my younger brothers. And the thing is, sort of to your point, I mean, people knew that I was certainly having a hard time. My father had died, but most people, even when I wrote my column, said we had no idea.
You lost a huge amount of weight,
Yeah.
and people kept saying to you, "Oh, wow, you look fantastic."
Yeah, I lost like 20 pounds in 6 weeks, and I probably lost most of it in the first 3 weeks. Yeah, and people would be like, "Oh, you look amazing," and you're living the dream, and and even when I would say, I'm having these crazy thoughts, and people would just be like, "Oh, you're so strong, you're so," and. I think one of the things I wanted to get through in my column was it only lasted a couple months and I barely made it. It was so hard. Every day was so hard that when you see somebody like a Kate Spade who they say was struggling for 5 years with depression, I can't imagine.